Can a Western or a Westerner become a Thai Rusi, or even a monk maybe? Somebody posted a video the other day on YouTube with my real name, Ajahn Spencer, something, some critique. Anyway, I went there and I saw somebody comment, which I didn't answer that comment, but I've been thinking about it for a couple of days and I'd love to answer that comment, so I thought I'd make this talk for anybody else who thinks that, because I used to think that this person said, I cannot believe that Ajahn Spencer or any Westerner can become a Thai Rusi and learn magic, or become a Rusi and learn magic and know about this and that and the other. And my first critical thoughts were basically, that's like saying Brazilians can't play football because it's an English game. It's for English people. Only English can play good football. Or only Westerners can't do what Muay Thai boxing, because that's a Thai thing. But most of the world champions of Thai boxing, of Muay Thai, are actually international Westerners or Singaporeans and from different parts of the world. Very few are from Thailand. So that for me is ridiculous. And secondly, that the Thai Rusi stole the whole Rusi tradition from the Indian Rishi, the real Rusi. And not only Rusi, but even monks. Luang Pu Tim himself, when he went with, I believe it was Luang Por Choi, to get, I'm not sure, to get the Vichayan Patbog from another Geji Ajahn. Luang Pu Tim knew that that particular Geji Ajahn liked to smoke ganja. And so he took some as offerings, and he got the Vicha Patbog for the Yan Patbog, for which Luang Pu Tim of Wat Lahan Rai is so famous. And the other monk didn't. So obviously he was very pleased with receiving some ganja. And you can even see in the museum of King Rama V a bong with a mother of pearl and an elephant head on it and stuff. And that in the legalization laws of Thailand, that it actually states before the Vietnam War, since ancient times, it has been kind of part of Thai culture, and you can see it in Wat Phra Kaew, in the Temple of the Emerald Buddha in the Royal Palace, in the Jitagam Phá Panang, in the fine art painting wall murals, stuff like people smoking bongs outside the palace, and monkeys, Wanora, Hanuman's soldiers smoking bongs. So the Rishi in India smoke bongs. The Lersi in Thailand do not. Some of them do now because it's legal. And actually all Rishi in India since 5,000 years have begun their ritual to communicate with Shiva, who is the Maharusi, the Maharishi, the Mahalersi. And you have Shiva Day, and all Lersi in Thailand Puja Pra Isuwan, Shiva, Ishvara, who has many forms, of course, dancing Shiva as the destroyer, and many emanations. And of course is one of a triple emanation called Trimurti, which is Brahma, Shiva and Vishnu. Shiva, Vishnu and Brahma, whichever order you want. But anyway, can a Westerner be a Thai Lersi or a monk? Well, I have to say that person's comments, I cannot believe that a Westerner can be a Lersi. I actually understand that person, because I used to think that until I knew better, because I was ignorant. And ignorant doesn't mean stupid, it means didn't know the facts. That's all. That's all that ignorant means. It means the darkness of non-knowledge. It doesn't mean stupid, because as soon as you know the knowledge, you're not ignorant anymore. So it's nothing to do with the power of your brain. So please don't be offended by the word ignorant when you hear this, the person who made this comment, because I'm going to post a link to this talk as my comment, with perhaps one line saying that's like saying Indians can't play cricket because it's a British game, Brazilians can't play football because it's a British game, Chinese can't play ping pong well because it's a British game, and Westerners can't win at Muay Thai because it's a Thai game. That's absolutely ridiculous. And then also when I was a monk, and I deliberately learned to speak, read and write Thai and calm, and learned magic, which I'd learned anyway with sacred geometry from age 17 in the Hermetic tradition. And when I became a tattoo artist and a Buddhist later in Nepal, after living in India, and then moved to Thailand, I moved from the Vajrayana sect of Karmapa, because I lived in the Himalayas, and I had lived under the teachings of two of the tulkus, of the four tulkus who protect and surround the Karmapa Lama. And then I came to Thailand and learned Thai. And am I a Westerner? Well, I left England when I was about, I used to go to Spain 4 times a year from about 5 years old to 10 years old. After that, I lived in Malta most of the time until I was 14 years old. And then I went back to England and lied about my age, that I was 15, not 14, going to be 16, and jumped a year and finished school early and got 0 in my exams. And then I went to Spain and lived in Spain. Then I went back to England for about a year, and then I went to Amsterdam, Berlin, South Germany, Switzerland, France, Luxembourg, Poland, East Germany, Italy. Most of the time I lived in Malta as a child, on the ocean, with a boat, like a sea gypsy, in England until I left, when I went back for a couple of years during my teens. I lived as a gypsy on the gypsy convoy, on the peace convoy, which was a very wild way of living off-grid, kind of like white trash. And the last 30 years I've been in Thailand, and I'm 57. I've been to 36 countries, the Philippines, India, Nepal. I became a Buddhist in Nepal. When I went back to Europe, lived in India, came to Thailand, went back to Europe for 8 years, around Germany, Barcelona, lived in Spain, tattooing. Came back to Thailand with all my tattoo equipment. Moved here with everything, all my tattoo designs, my books, my equipment, everything with tattoo, and a few clothes. And I tattooed on Koh Phangan. And I learned how to read and write and speak Thai. And then I bought this book about Yan Loi Pat, and it taught you how to read and write calm. And I went to get a tattoo from Luang Pi Pan at Wat Bang Prat, and I was a Buddhist and a tattoo artist, and I saw the tattoo designs, and I was a sacred geometry student since age 17. And with ADHD, I'm always decoding things. So I asked for permission, and I got it. And later I became a pram, staying at temples for weeks and weeks on end at different temples, traveling around Thailand, dressed in white, learning for weeks and months at temples how to behave, what ordination means, what keeping the Buddhist Vinaya means, until the point where my teachings, my, what you would say, preachings, and my quotations, and my chanting, that I was always invited into the chapel to chant with the monks, even though I wasn't a monk, and the other people in white would sit at the back of the shrine room, and I would sit in front of the dais where the monks were sat somewhat higher because of the microphones, because they wanted the sound of my voice. And this was at Wat Bang Nom Ko, and at Wat Bang Nom Ko, I was the first foreigner ever to practice there in its hundreds of years of history since Ayutthaya times, since Luang Por Ban, and afterwards Luang Por Rusi Ling Dam, and I had to learn for weeks on end. They gave me a really big, thick book with all of the explanations of keeping the 227 rules of the Buddhist canon of the Vinaya Pitaka, the monks' rules, which are really more than 1,000 if you really interpret them. But if you keep the 5 precepts perfectly, actually you complete all 227 rules. But that's another conversation. And afterwards, being a monk, I already had the magical tradition, I already had the calm script, I already had Sakyant long before I became a monk. When I was still a Brahmin, I ordained as a monk later, and I got to make rituals with my step-grandfather, who is Luang Por Pun of Wat Ban Sang in Roi Et, who is a master of Hun Payon and other amulets, animist charms and amulets, and is a Luksit of Luang Pu Man, one of the few living ordained masters of Luang Pu Man of the Thai forest tradition. And we both did the Pruk Phang Sao Egg ceremony for my brother's house to take the middle pillar and bless it. Strangely enough, the things you needed for the Vicha to bless it, I hadn't learned it yet, but the things I took with me to bury with the middle pillar were exactly the 4 or 5 things necessary to put inside. But I just decided by accident, which some monks said, I would say, that came from a previous life and that I already knew. I would just say it's a coincidence, but it's strange, it was nice. Anyway, afterwards, I disrobed and I started to wear white and go to the temple of Ajahn Toy, Nabot, and other Rusi. Of course, I went to Ajahn Nu and the other ones, but I don't want to talk about them. And of course, to my master, Luang Pi Pan, most often, who I had been going to now for 20 years at that time, or almost 18 years, 16 years. This was, I don't know how many years. This was then about 2006, 2007. And Ajahn Toy had a Luksit Ek who was a monk who was learning and going to make the amulets for Waikru for Ajahn to bless. The Rusi to bless. And the Rusi asked me, I said, would you like to learn machine tattooing and you help me develop my hand tattooing? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I can do Sakyan. I learned at Wat Bang Pra with Luang Pi Pan, and I taught myself mostly. And he said, well, what's this yant? And so he tested me, and he gave me a book of shadows and gave me about 5 or 6 yant, which I think I'll show in a YouTube video, which he gave to me. But some of them he forbade me to share with somebody, including his takrut. And he asked me then to inscribe his Takrut, Kongrapang Kraukrat, Utkasun, which are leaden Takrut tone inscribed with a Khmer secret formula for Kraukrat and put inside a bullet. And his Luxit egg got the job of taking the inscribed yantrafoils from me, which I inscribed for him, Ajahn, and gave to the monk, and he put them, I have a photo of that on Facebook, of me giving them to the monk and him putting them in the bullet shells, and the bullet shells in a khan, which is a bowl that monks use, a sacred bowl for offerings and holy water and stuff, and for doing kanha rituals. It's a khan, it's like a bowl. And so I did 99 of those Takrut, and I'm not sure, me and Rusi, David Tevicho, who is also a foreign Rusi, but he is a Chiwok, and he lived in the jungle, living on, sucking on, what would you call that, pickled peanuts, and putting pieces of lake lye and other elements under his tongue, and sitting on the earth and learning how to draw vitamins through the earth, the air, and the elements under his tongue, and filtering stream water, and learning tudong and how to make medicinal herbs. And he did, I think, a master's degree in Thai traditional massage and healing and herbal healing. And he knows more than most Thai Rusi, to be honest. And I won't say that about myself. I'll leave that for who wishes to think so and who doesn't wish to think so. And so for my friend who commented, who I fully understand, because I used to think like that until I saw that people like Woody from the Thai talk show came to me to get a sakyant because they'd heard of me. And the next day I had queues of Thai people, including people from the news there, lined up asking for sakyant, which I refused because I don't do it for business. I only do it when somebody really needs one. And my main interest is in decoding sacred geometry, not in the tattooing aspect. And I learned and taught myself and got hold of the ancient grimoires. I spent tens of thousands of dollars on ancient grimoires in the north from the hill tribes, and Khom grimoires from Cambodia, and learning how to write the script, and learning the methods of empowerment, and using the methods of empowerment I learned meditating as a Tudong forest monk living in a cave. Can a Muay Thai boxer be a foreigner? Well, most of the world champions are. Very few Thais are. Can a Brazilian play English football better than an Englishman? Yeah, most of them do. Can a Spanish footballer or a German footballer or a French footballer, yeah? Or, can a Thai person not sing better than an English person? Of course they can, yeah? And some Filipinos can sing Hotel California better than the Eagles. So I would say, after listening to Thanissaro Bhikkhu, a Canadian monk who ordained with Ajahn Cha Sopato, now passed away, of Wat Nong Papong, who continued the forest tradition of Tudong monks of Luang Pu Man and Luang Pu Sao. Yeah, Luang Pu Man of Wat Non Pa Non Sawan, yeah, Luang Pu Sao, and Ajahn Chayasaro, who is English, and listen to both of them. And there's a Malaysian monk who was once Mahayana and turned Theravada and got bullied enough that he went back to Malaysia, and now he gives fantastic teachings. I forgot his name, but most people will know him in Malaysia. And none of them are Thai. As for Rusi, Thai Rusi, There are Thai Rusi, most of them are hill tribe people, and in the Lana, Lao district, and on the Khmer area, and in the forest. But the Rusi that you will see in Samnak Sakyant taking money, that will give you the rules for Sakyant. But a Rusi doesn't do Sakyant. A Rusi, he studies meditation and practices meditation. He studies all forms of sciences and knowledge, music, vibrational energy, sciences. Why do I make music? Because everything is vibration, yeah? Because of the 7 principles of energy, which I will be teaching, because they exist they exist in the Lersi tradition, and they exist in the Buddhist tradition, and they exist in quantum physics, and they exist in Hermeticism, which was the first form of sacred geometry and occult ritual magic and astral visualization magic I ever learned from Hermes Trismegistus, who was the first mage ever and the first Rusi. So if you think of Hermes, who later became Mercury, and Thoth, always had a staff, just like Merlin, yeah, and a beard, just like a Rusi, and long hair, just like a Rusi, and a robe, just like a Rusi, and had Vetmund, kata, meaning spellcasting, just like a Rusi. And so, actually, not even India can lay claim to Rusi. You could say ascetics. Every single culture has had its ascetics, even China. Singapore and America, not so much, except for Native Americans. But the rest are all immigrants of 400 and plus years from other countries. So they don't have a tradition of Rusi. But even the Vikings had their shamans, their seers, yeah, and their ascetics, yeah, who given up the world in order to see within. And Rusi, the practice of a Rusi is more on himself than on others. It's not wake up every morning and open your office and receive a queue of devotees. Don't give them any teachings. Take some money that Poge doesn't get. And Poge, Rusi, the original Poge, which means the great-grandfather of all Rusi, Maharusi, in the heavens is Shiva, but the Maharusi who came to earth is Hermes Trismegistus 5,000 years ago, and he passed it on to the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Sumerians, the Vedic, the Aryans, the Vedic Hindus, onto Thailand, Europe, and all of the magical traditions from the Masonic, Solomonic, sacred geometry traditions, the sacred geometry you see in Christianity in their buildings and their windows and their symbolism, and that you see in Freemasonry, and that you see in Islam, even though it's not depictions of people, it is patterns, which is more to do with vibrational energy, actually, and actually fields of energy, because matter doesn't exist, which is another conversation. Quantum Dhamma, which is physics, or quantum physics and the Dhamma, or science and the Dhamma, how they agree with each other these days. But anyway, I learned to make Muan San. I spent decades learning about amulets in every area I lived, living with the locals and the local knowledgeable traders and the local knowledgeable Luksit of the temple who knew Luang Pu before he passed away, or go to the temple when Luang Pu was still alive and learn and live at the temple and hang around in the amulet section and learn, and at Wat Bang Nom Ko learn how to do the Wichak Yankrop Pet. When the monks were going to stay in the Pasha, in the cemetery with Luang Popan, one night they crapped out And so I took a glot from the monk I was staying in his hut with. I was in white, I wasn't ordained yet, and I stayed there all night. Yes, I pooped my pants at first. Funny noises, is that a tiger, is this that? Is it wild dogs? Is it a spirit? There's other stories about Wat Bang Nom Ko, which was the first temple I really spent weeks at practicing. I used to run out of money, live in Bangkok, get a couple of guide jobs, so I'd make about 5,000 or 6,000 baht a month, maybe $200 max. And every third month have to go to Laos to do a visa, so that knocked my money out every third month, and I would have to, end of every month for 10 days, stay in a temple and wake up in the morning, sweep the dog shit from the temple, sweep the bird shit, then go behind the monk with a bag to help him carry the alms, the food, and the donations of the Jatut Bajais. Actually, you shouldn't give money, you should give medicine, needle and thread and stuff like that to mend your clothes with. Yeah, you can give clothes, you can give food, yeah. And the basic, the four basic requisites, yeah. And you shouldn't actually ask monks to perform house blessings and stuff like that, because their business is actually their own, of concentrating on themselves, not of teaching Dharma to others. That came much later. During the Buddhist time, people would stay in the mountains in caves alone, and once every month they would come down to the grove, to the deer park, and listen to the Buddha recite the Patimokkha, which are the rules for monks to observe themselves with. Look at your own heart and watch yourself. That's what a monk's job is, as well as develop your mind and insight development with vipassana, yeah, and with jhana meditation, absorption, which is the same as Dr. Monroe's hemisync, which synchronizes the left and right side of the brain. It's the same as Buddhist meditation. I'll talk about that another day. The Gateway Experience was a CIA project. You have the tapes in stereo, and you can practice them with me on YouTube Live, and we can meditate to them, and we can do some Buddhist meditation and compare and see how actually they bring the same result, because many roads lead to Rome, and Buddhism on other planets isn't called Buddhism. And don't think the Dharma just exists here and now, in this place. It exists in many places and times. So, can a Farang be a Rusi? What is a Rusi? What is a Thai Rusi? And no magic? Well, I would say golf was invented by the British, but it's not always the British that win golf. And ping pong was invented by the British, but the Chinese are usually the best. Britain's only brought it back once. And soccer was invented, football, by the British. But you look at Spain, Brazil, Germany, yeah, even Poland and America, for example, has some great players. So, and in Africa, so many, Cameroon and great countries who play great football. They're not English. Why can a foreigner become a footballer? Yeah. And why can a Thai person become a Christian priest? Because Christian priests is from the West. It's imported. Yeah. So Thais become Christian priests. And Thais do tarot card readings on the street, but the tarot comes from Kabbalistic Hermetic tradition. That belongs more to me than them. Yeah. And the runes, many people throw the runes. I throw the runes, not anymore, but I did. When I was 17, I knew the runes fluently. So what is a Rusi? It's an ascetic. In India, it's a rishi. In Thailand, when the Brahmins came to Thailand, the Hindus, the Thais saw the Rishi and they adopted it and distorted it into their own cultural version. Nothing wrong with that, so long as they're ascetic. Most of them aren't, the ones you might know who are famous, because the real ones aren't famous. For obvious reasons. If you can't think of them, then think of them. I'm not going to explain everything to you. So, if a monk ordains me and the monk tells me that I can teach and I can empower amulets, and a Kruba Jan Rusi adopts me as his first Luksit and puts his first Luksit into the second position and asks me to make the takrut and amulets for his Waikru and help him empower them, and that Thai people come to me as a Rusi and as an Ajahn and ask me to do holy water blessings, which I refuse, because it's a Brahmin practice, not a Buddhist practice, and it's not part of my practice, but I will actually begin again soon because of my new understandings about vibrational energy, mentalism, polarity, gender, rhythm, oscillation, different ways that everything is just energy fields. There's no such thing as matter. And so that is why I make music, kata, chanting, speech itself. The sound of the ocean on the beach is very good. It's rhythmic. Rhythm is one of the 7 principles of Hermes and polarity. The rhythm, like the pendulum, swings back and forth and back and forth. And the distance of the back is the distance of the forth. And to know that these are wavelengths and to know how to tune the mind with the hemisync process or with meditation and vipassana, and to develop the itibat si. It's to do with knowledge, Can you be a Thai boxer? Well, it depends on how well you practice, Can you be a good soccer player if you're not an Englishman, even though it wasn't invented in England? Well, that depends on your studies, and your practice. Even if you're Brazilian, or Singaporean, Can you become a good swimmer in Singapore, where swimming has never been really a fashion until lately? Yes, you can. You give it another 10 years after the series in Singapore about the hunky swimmer guys, and swimming has now become a popular sport for people in Singapore. I think in 10 years in the Olympics you're going to see some really, really good swimmers. But swimming doesn't come from Singapore. Swimming comes from every country. So, do you have to be Thai to be a swimmer? No. Do you have to be Thai to be a Rusi? No. If you did, Rusi Sompit would not have taken Ajahn Lersi, David Tevicho Lucy, as his Luksit, and passed him and invited him to do corp crew, put masks on people during Waikru ceremonies. And my Ajahn would not have invited me to assist in inscribing and making the amulets, and accepted me. And Woody Talk Show and many, many, many people would not have asked me to do Lersi practices for them. And there would not have been a 45-minute long talk show with me about Rusiism and foreign Rusi, and can a foreigner be a Rusi and why, to explain why you can, and that Thai Rusi are actually also copycats of something they saw in the Indian Rishi. And the Indian Rishi learned that from somewhere else, and Jesus learned it from the Indian Rishi. And the Sumerians and the Greeks and the Egyptian Thoth and the Greek Mercury, and Hermes Trismegistus, who came and gave these vichar to humanity, of the 7 principles of vibrational energy which emanate from mentalism, visualization. So, kana farang Rusi? Well, I think there are some Brazilian footballers much better than British footballers, and football is a British tradition and invention. Rusiism is not a Thai invention, but it is a tradition. But that doesn't mean a foreigner can't do it. Many foreigners come and sing Luk Tung. There's a guy called Joe Nutt, and he's got a female counterpart, and they were very famous 20 years ago. They had many albums, both of them, one from Switzerland and one from Australia. And they sang perfect Thai Luk Tung music, and they were accepted by the Thai people. And so if the Thai people accept them, accept me, and accept Lersi, David Tewicho, and accept Ajahn Sumeto, great Geje Ajahn, yeah? I think he's Australian or British. And Ajahn Chayasaro, British monk, and Ajahn Thanisaro Bhikkhu, Canadian monk, yeah? Abhayagiri monastery, yeah? In the West, as great teachers who come to Thailand, to Wat Nong Papong, and teach in Thai to Thai people and teach in English to Thai people. And Ajahn Chayasaro, English monk, great Tudong monk ordained with Ajahn Shah, he runs the Banyapatip Foundation, which also helps elephants in Thailand and teaches Thai people much better about how to protect elephants in Thailand, and gives great Dharma teachings in English and Thai on YouTube, as well as Thanissaro Bhikkhu, Thanissaro Bhikkhu, or Jayasaro, Jayasaro Bhikkhu, Bhikkhu. Yeah? And you can listen to them and see that they, in fact, are foreigners, but they are among the best teachers, even to Thai monks. Yeah? And that there is another foreign Rusi who was German about 50 years ago, who was very famous and who taught a lot of Thai Rusi, his Wicha, whose name I cannot remember, but I have seen his picture on the walls in Thai amulet shops of a friend, in the house of a friend, and he performs busha to that Rusi because his practice was dedicated. And so, you know, Indians play cricket, that's English. Chinese play ping pong, that's English. Yeah. Swiss play croquet, that's French. So do British, that's French. Yeah. Brazilians play football, and Spanish and Germans and French people and Australians, and everybody around the world plays football. But that's English. But not the best players in the world are English. So do you have to be English to be a footballer? No. Do you have to be, can a Westerner be a Thai Rusi? Yes, of course he can. For 4 given reasons. So, sorry about the slight sarcasm, and I really understand you, because I really was honoured when I saw that Thai people accepted me. And that made me really realize, and that was when I really knew that a foreigner can be a Thai monk or a Thai Rusi or a Thai or a practitioner, because it's not limited to nationality. No practice that leads you to self-betterment, be it Freemasonry, Rusiism, Thai style or Indian style or Buddhist style or whatever style, shamanism like in Vajrayana or like the Native Americans or the South American Native Americans, yeah, Native Indians. It doesn't mean you can't be a shaman, yeah. It depends what you're interested in and what you dedicate yourself to. It has nothing to do with nationality. And there's my answer. And that is my explanation to everybody, and there is my answer to the person who commented that cannot believe a Westerner like Ajahn Spencer could become a Thai Rusi and achieve what the Thai Rusi do. Well, that's like saying, I could not believe that a Westerner could learn how to become a Thai boxer and do what a Thai boxer can do, because most of the Western Thai boxers beat the Thai boxers, yeah? Except if you go in Pattaya to these places where they put punch bag people in from the West who are going to get knocked over. But if you go to World Championships, you will see that most World Champions are foreigners, not Thais. And that's a Thai tradition, Thai boxing, and it's practiced most here with the most access to facilities for practice. But in the West, you still get people come here, practice, go home, and dedicate themselves to that practice. Look at YouTube and look at fights and analyze and practice, come back and get better, go back again and practice, and then they teach. And I can tell you the name of one. He's a lion, Alistair Simpson from Sky Muay Thai, on the Isle of Skye. Who's also like a paramedic, very busy. Anyway, regards to him. So, there you go. Can a Farang be a Rusi? Well, ask the Thai people who believe in me, because if you, from whatever country you are in, cannot believe that, I understand, because I couldn't until I saw that if Thai people believe in me, and I believe in me, and I see the results from my efforts, that they are real, and that the Buddha's teachings and the teachings of the Tamra Sayawed of magic actually work for me, and that I have learned to synchronize my mind at least to a minimal point where I can release and manifest certain effects within myself and without myself, why not? Who are you to say I am not a Lersi when you don't even know what a Lersi means? Because Lersi actually means ascetic, and there are ascetics in every country. So of course I can learn the Thai tradition, just like a Brazilian can learn the British football tradition, or a Chinese can learn ping pong much better than the inventor of ping pong himself. And a good teacher, I've always said as a tattoo artist to my apprentices, some of them got much better than me. Was I jealous? No. Because do you know what? If your student ends up better than you and supersedes you, do you know what that means? It means he's had a bloody good teacher. Because the goal of a good teacher who is not jealous is a teacher whose jetana arom, whose intent is well meant enough that he doesn't keep something secret for himself unless it's to the end. Some do, yeah. I give everything to my Luxit because I want them to get better than me. I didn't get good enough as I wanted to be. However good I might get, I'll never be as good as I want to be unless I become an Arahant, enlightened Buddha. Yeah? But I do want my students to advance further, and that's why I sometimes teach things I haven't mastered myself yet, just in case somebody cleverer than me might actually get there before me. As to Rusiism, I'd like to thank the person who made that critical comment, which I accept and I understand because I thought like that too. And that's why I wanted to explain this to you and everybody else. That it's inspired me, so thank you. Because it's inspired me to start to make some YouTube lives and re-begin some public practice as Rusi and teachings as Rusi, and show and talk about what is Rusi and display what is the practice and ways of thinking and what are the interests of a true Rusi, and of course the Tamra and the Prawat the history and the stories and the legends of the Rusi, and you will see if any Thai Rusi, anywhere on the internet or in any samnak or even in the forest, will be able to expound as much information about the 108,000 million Rusi that there are, yeah, and the war of the Rusi, and the different kinds of Rusi, yeah, and their history and story, their connection with Ramakian, their connection with the Himapant forest, yeah, the connection with each other, the Thai tales, the Indian tales, the difference between the two. Shame my friend Rodin has disappeared. He would help to talk about Ramayana, Indian, Ramakian Thai, and the Indonesian Ramayana and Balinesian Ramayana are all adapted to their own culture. So what's the Indian Ramayana doing in Thailand as the Ramakian, and Hanuman doing in Thailand? It's Indian. Can a foreigner be a Thai Rusi? First of all, the Rusi is not Thai, he's a Rusi, and that's it. There's no such thing as an Indian or a Thai ascetic. It's just ascetics. Why are you bringing nationality into it? Open your mind, sir. Ajahn Spencer? With, can a foreigner be a Thai Lersi for the Buddha Magic Project and for my own channel, and responding to an understandable critical complaint? Wishing everybody well, and may all beings be happy. Signing off.